Hey everyone, welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I am so grateful that you're here. This is a Catalyst Astrology Report. We're going to look at the weekly astrology from the first quarter moon, which is actually going to be on the 9th of January 2022 up to the full moon. So really the culminating point for this astrology report is going to be the full moon on the 17th with a full moon in Cancer at 28 degrees Cancer. The sun will be at 28 degrees Capricorn. Wow, we are really going to start giving a lot of attention and focus and transformational energy towards the power structure. And with the full moon on the 17th, we're definitely going to feel into where our how much structural integrity, our armor, our emotional armor, our root system and stabilizing force in our life emotionally, which is normally when we're talking about Cancer, we're talking about the home, the family, the bonds of our intimate relationships, whatever they are, the spiritual community, the place where we find our self-esteem, basically, is what Cancer represents. So with this full moon on the 17th, I think that we're going to see very much, and not only see, but feel very much in the feels of where our self-confidence is truly situated and how stable it is, because we are not only going to have a full moon with the sun at 28 degrees Capricorn, but it will be, if we look at the full moon itself on the calendar here, we're also going to see that there will be a conjunction with Pluto right before it, a day before it, not even a day before. And so there's just so much potential for the manipulative and exploitive behavior to become very known and on the surface and illuminated. Some real power plays between our own ego and stuff that is very much repressed. And when we're talking about Capricorn, it's not necessarily about the individual. It is about the power structures in our lives that represent the institutions that hold us together collectively, be it a family, a community, or an economy or a government. Just having Pluto and the sun together right before this full moon, it's going to be very powerful reckoning, I would say, and certainly an illumination of that which has been under demolition for a very long time. So with Pluto and Capricorn especially. And this particular degree, these are galactic degrees in galactic astrology. These are in fact Pleiadian starseed markings. So there'll be a lot more information about this particular area of Capricorn and how important it is over the next couple of months in a report that's coming about the Pleiadian revival, which is mostly about the shift of the moon's lunar nodes into Taurus and Scorpio for the next 18 months, and especially the first couple of months where it's in the territory of the Pleiades, and what that means for our collective evolution and growth at a soul level. So there'll be so much more information about that. And of course, there's going to be the astrology forecast per sign that is going to follow this general report. But this is just a check-in about the week leading up to this full moon. Oh, not to mention the fact that 28 degrees Capricorn is the Pluto return point for the United States. So also too that the full moon is going to be very much related to this particular aspect. And if you don't know what that means, it means when Pluto returns to the point it was at the birth of the United States as a country, which was the signing of the Declaration of Independence. So it returns to the same degree because Pluto has like a 230-year orbit roughly around the sun. And so people don't often have Pluto returns, but nations and much older institutions do. And it's been in this territory since 2008. So it's reaching this culminating factor for all of us, but certainly for the United States. This is definitely a reckoning for the U.S. and what it represents. And it does represent the larger community and the potential of it and everything we've capitalized collectively from it and what it has to offer. And Pluto is the power of transformation in the chart. And so to have this return and this reckoning is certainly a powerful moment of metamorphosis. And this is something that we've been paying attention to for a while. Many astrologers are aware of this, especially after the Saturn-Pluto conjunction in January of 2020, also in Capricorn, like roughly 22 degrees Capricorn. So this whole area has been under investigation at these large transformational dynamics for quite a while, at least in terms of astrology. So at least in terms of Western astrology, I should say. It's a different territory when it comes to sidereal or Vedic astrology. Much more tracking the planets and the sun and the moon in relation to actual constellation and fixed stars, as opposed to an equal section, equal sections around the circumference of a horizon, right? That these signs are in portions of the sky that are separated into equal 30-degree sections all around. So it's much more mathematical and geometrical, whereas Vedic astrology, for instance, or more like horary astrology, which is, focusing on the fixed stars and the constellations themselves, are much more relevant to, I would say, time. More accessible to time, whereas Western astrology, being more geometric and mathematically based, seems to be much more about patterns and something outside of the cycles of the human activity. But I'm also much more educated and researched in Western astrology, so I'm biased, of course, but that's what calls to me, is the geometry of it. Okay, anyway, just getting astro nerd on you. So let's start looking at this actual week. That's going to start with our first quarter moon on the 9th. So what we're going to see here, my friends, is that, this time frame that I just spoke about with the full moon, and even after, right, as the sun is going to cross the last degree of Capricorn, it's going to move into Aquarius. There's going to be a Mercury retrograde during this week, okay? That's something that we really shouldn't forget, because what's likely going to transpire is over the course of the week leading up to the full moon, that there's going to be some pretty substantial realizations and maybe some very I don't want to say explosive feelings, but certainly some very intense and fiery emotions, the kettle boiling, so to speak. So, but with all of this Capricorn energy, especially because Venus, and actually we can't start this conversation unless we go back to the 8th, which is going to be on Sunday. So because we have the sun and Venus that are going to come together, and this is so beautiful, especially in Capricorn. I mean, it's really about stepping up and taking responsibility, maybe taking responsibility before you feel like you're ready to take responsibility for something. But with the sun and Venus involved, like, there's just going to be so much confidence in our relationships and a sense of authenticity in the things that really matter to us, that we'll want to kind of step up, right? I think that there will be a lot of for the most part, it'll be a very I don't know, not ego boosting, and just confidence in what we're doing, confidence in what we've ascribed value to. Of course, Venus is still retrograde, so a lot of the actual sensitivity to meaning and value and tradition, and those relationships and projects that actually we want to put our energy into, it's just going to have so much more like brightness to it and illuminating factor to it. So these two are coming together and really activating each other and kind of crossing paths, of course, because Venus is in a retrograde. But this is about stepping up, maybe a little bit before, but there's a certain amount of there's just a certain amount of pride with the sun, especially sun in Capricorn. There's so much power here, and just like a sense of confidence about even though it may not feel like we're ready necessarily, that there is a sense that we can feel where this could lead to. And yeah, it may accelerate some sort of internal growth, I would say. But this is a very important connection, because right after this is when the moon meets Chiron, and this is going to be the territory that the first quarter moon squares the sun in Capricorn, is in Aries. So it's worth looking at this day before on the 8th a little bit more closely, because when the moon meets Chiron, of course, there's going to be the feels around all of our triggers, and certainly our inner wounding, inner child wounding, shame and guilt for being ourselves, and pulling us back into these old identities. And so every time the moon comes and meets Chiron, it just gets that much more magnified, and we feel it that much more. And so in some ways it could be more of a intuitive experience of it if we've been working actively with this, but also to just kind of amplifies or just deepens the experience, maybe makes it that much more emotional and personal. So it's in this realm of Aries that I think is important to be aware of as we begin the second lunar quarter, which is on the 9th with the first quarter moon. The quarter moons are always some sort of crisis, right? It's that first stopping point, or that first, kink in the plan since the new moon. And we should talk about that. The new moon that was in Capricorn, about fire and letting it burn, right? That's part of the materium, is that there is going to be a natural process of unfolding and decay and degradation and demolition, which is part of the Capricornian aspect, but also too that when you realize that the fire is the agent of purification, that then it is a natural part of the process to allow for further growth and, to burn things down, but also to fertilize the land for the new growth and to purify that which was maybe not, was not good for, or was in some way impeding the full unfolding of that materium, whatever it is. So when we get to Aries, though, we are talking about the individual ego consciousness and what's in our best interest and our self-interest, and not even thinking about anything else involved yet, because you're just nothing more than just a basic level of consciousness, right? Your psyche is just in its isness in Aries, right? You're just a seed. You're just a child with all of the potential. And so feeling into that while at the same time meeting this responsibility to fulfill that which was activated with this new moon, which was, all right, we're gonna grow by way of purification and fire, and have the will to transcend ourselves and come back as a result of the enigma of life and death being solved through fire, right? Fire is the symbol. We letting it burn like a candle within each of us. And so this is the first real challenge to that and how we feel about it. And when you're talking about Capricorn, though, it is about the community. It is about not just us. And Aries is nothing but us in our subjective experience and how we act by way of just being ourselves. And so it's going to be the first real challenge to this, because there is a sense, the downloads have been incredible. The last couple of days, you've either been just getting like really clear vision and access to larger wave function than you have in a while, or you've been having incredible dreams that are really just like mind-blowing, or two, just like straight up sleeping. I know a lot of people that are really tired and just sleeping and sleeping and sleeping, or even just like going into much more beta brainwave, I guess. I don't know what you would call it. People are just kind of like, their bodies are just like, just stop, and they just check out for a while, and they're like, what just happened? It's kind of like losing time, but I also think that people are sleeping a lot, and it's because there's just, I think Mercury in Aquarius is really just like laser pointing right into our nervous systems, like the full download all in one package. And some people just need to sleep it off, and some people are just processing it in their dreams, and some of us are just like, nothing more than just like a transformer. So when Mercury stations retrograde during this week, which we'll get to, it's important to take into consideration that it may really be it might feel like disruptive in some way, especially because it will almost touch Uranus in a square. We'll get to that. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, shall we? I tend to do that. So the first feeling here as we're going through this moon in Pisces time, where we're really all just kind of losing ourselves to the full experience of the woo, as Cliff High calls it, and which is the Akash, right? It is the field of consciousness. It is divine source. However you want to conceptualize it, the Pisces realm. We've just all kind of like melted into it, and everybody's having their own experience of it. But then as the moon comes into Aries, and makes this connection with Chiron, and then we have the first quarter moon, we're going to start feeling like, well, who am I? What am I doing? Like, what's my spark? How do I meet the world in my subjective experience? What is my isness? And the first it's going to be in a square to Venus, who just came off of the conjunction with the sun, and is really still engaged with the realm of political and social power, and the meaning of it, and like taking a very responsible leadership type of position, especially in her retrograde. Like, we're really going back over in this inventory. It's still happening in terms of what we're responsible for, what has meaning, what is valuable to us within the larger social context that we're still part of, regardless if it's going away or not. We're still part of the process, and she's representing a very real and sense-based experience of political power and what that means. And so the first thing is the moon coming into a square that's just like, oh, maybe I can just be on my magic carpet and just kind of transcend all of this. And that's the first real square here. And then the moon comes right after that and squares the sun. So here is like, so the crisis begins like in our body, and in a sense maybe that we don't have pure knowing of it yet. We just get a sense of it, that there is part of us that emotionally wants to kind of transcend this whole thing. And then it comes into the square with the sun, and it's just like, well, I want to, the isness wants to reach out in compassion and to have an experience that is bringing others along onto that magic carpet ride. Whereas the sun's like, you know what though? The real expression here and the real power can be harnessed in a much more communally harmonious participation into something where we're all together. And this is going to be a real struggle, because we're going to start feeling into something totally new coming forward that's within us, but yet still closing out these cycles that are like have to be adhered to, because that's part of the Capricorn and material world, is that it is time, and it is the regardless of how you think about it, even as still a cycle of time, and it's still time that has its own shape and structure. And so we still are fulfilling those experiences, and certainly finding a sense of like voice and power through them. It's just that we're starting to really feel into, well, what do I want? What can I do? And how can I actually maximize my own potential emotionally and intuitively? Because if we get too caught up in here when the sun and Pluto meet each other, and then we have the full moon, I have a sense here that we could really lose ourselves. So this is important, that we're allowing this square to just be what it is, and to feel into it, and feel into what it is that we as individual beings, like what is it that we can do, and how can we use our own emotional and feeling based landscape or intuitive process to maybe transcend what is still a very real and very powerful experience in terms of the collective institutions. It's not going to be easy. So as we go on through the week, here's Monday, and the moon comes into Taurus. right? And then the sun comes into a sextile with Neptune. I've already talked about this once because Venus had done this once already. These are two very strong Lyran starseed positions, incredible amount of power, ambition, just total confidence in what one is doing, natural leadership abilities, both of these. And when Venus was here, is the same thing I'm going to say here, except now with the sun, it's much more illuminated. It is much more confident. It's much more a way of we're expressing ourselves, as opposed to Venus, which usually is much more in the senses, much more in the body, much more related to what's valuable to us. The sun is about how we find our voice. And again, what team are we on, and what team are we giving ourselves to, right? And what is the end goal, and like what is the quality of the dynamic interchange? And when we are so strong and powerful within that, we can invest that into this position of Pisces that Neptune has been in, which is really trusting the flow of the woo that we're part of, and having the capacity to have a positive outlook, a hopeful outlook, to feel looked after and guarded, but like a guardian at the same time, being able to feel for ourselves what is coming, and have a positive and almost innocent outlook just based on our tactile sensation, right? That's all we have left in Pisces. There's no boundaries, there's no borders, there is no meaning necessarily, right? There's no wall, but there's also no protection either. So you're fully immersed in the experience, and you have to just kind of find your way through it, knowing that everything consolidates back to the very end into the next cycle. And this is the process of letting go and being in surrender to the flow of the woo, or the flow of the Akash, or the flow of the quantum realm. So in having complete trust and surrendering to a refreshing spiritual revival, which Neptune and Aries may represent, again, we can invest this into, the sun in Capricorn is it's so powerful, and it's really going to, I think, clarify for a lot of people, like, whose team they're really on and whose team they want to be on. And it's because they've managed to really align with the flow of the highest vibrating energy, rather than the false light or the propaganda, or just giving into like kind of the fantasy or the escapism, like really being in alignment with the source, or God, or the Great Spirit, or the universe, and that making an impact, and fulfilling, even in some ways, this really strong voice in like, yes, this is the team I'm on, this is what we're trying to accomplish, and there is flow, and there's dynamic interchange, and there is an equal participation. That is really, really powerful to have going on this week. There's going to be like so much clarification before Mercury stations its retrograde. So just be aware that it's going to move quickly. The moon will meet Uranus, of course. And what day is this? The 11th. Yeah, the moon's just going to move through Taurus, right? That means that it's going to come into Pleiadian territory. It's also going to meet the North Node. Rahu is in conjunction with Alcyon, another Pleiadian starseed marking. They're just everywhere. This is why we have to talk about it in its own report. And then the moon's going to come through. You can see it here, come through all of this Pleiadian territory, 24 Taurus to 0 degrees Gemini. Hold on one second, guys. Here we go. So it's going to move through this area. Venus is still retrograde. And so, yeah, we have a moment here where the moon meets her own north node. And this is, it's like we will feel right into it will be as if there is no separation between us and the glass bottom of the boat. And we will see exactly where, like in our own selves, we'll have a moment of seeing where we're truly going and getting probably the most, I wouldn't say complete, but so much more access to what lies beneath than we normally would have, because the moon is going to meet this point on the 13th, right? That's the 13th. And this is right before Mercury stations retrograde. And it's going to like come right up. It's not even going to, it's just minutes away from a direct square with Uranus. But it's just shy of it. And this is important because this retrograde is now a time where we have gotten a lot of downloads. And this retrograde period with Mercury is going to be when we integrate them. And we will need to have some silence. We will need to have a quiet hour in order to really allow this inspiration to come through. And it's already come through. I think it's going to be the processing period now. And you can tell that it's come through because everybody is feeling so much right now, and everybody's responding, at least everybody I talk to, in different ways, especially the more sensitive people and the starseeds and the light workers. They're just getting overtaken in a good way. Their bodies are like, okay, I'm just taking these huge waves of information coming in. So when Mercury stations retrograde on the 14th, this is the time where we're going to start processing and unzipping all of these large files after getting like this massive intuitive, like our channel goes very deep and vast, and we see the whole picture through our own subconscious in that moment of where we're going, in that moment that the moon meets Rahu and then Mercury stations retrograde. It's like, okay, well, you might have gotten that full impression, but now it's time to actually like unpack all of that information and put it where it needs to, well, at least maybe not put it where it needs to go, but be able to read it when it's time, be able to read that file when it's time. And the only way to do that seems to be to allow for this introverted or certainly internalized cognitive experience that Mercury retrograde is going to have. So things are going to still keep happening, but we have to keep this Mercury retrograde for the next couple of weeks in mind in terms of communication, the information, the dissemination of information, how we are receiving that information, all of the equipment, all of the technical aspects of communication, all of these things are part of it. And this degree of Aquarius really is about being like in a silent moment in order to tap into the collective. So just, I don't know, I'm getting weird feels about this, especially after the moon hits 0 degrees at the North Node, in terms of like, you get this vast experience, and then it's like, okay, but all the mechanisms for tapping into the collective are now going to get like shut down in some way. I don't know if that's true. That's just kind of a vibe I'm getting. Either way, that's going to be the time where we really process some information that we've been getting, okay? Jupiter is now in conjunction with Fomalhaut. I've talked about that on the last daily transmission, so I would invite you to go back and check that out. In fact, I will just link that at the end of this video if you're on YouTube. If you're on BitChute, you just scroll down and you just find the magic is in the process. We talked about Fomalhaut, and that'll give you an idea of what this degree of Jupiter really represents. So that's the 14th. We got the 15th. Let's see here. This is where, the moon moves into Cancer, and this is where we're getting close to the full moon. So the Venus is still retrograde. Mercury is now retrograde. And the Venus is also in conjunction now with Vega, right? Within a degree of fixed star Vega in her retrograde. What's going to happen here is the moon's going to move through Cancer. It's going to come into conjunction with what? Sirius, right? The fixed star Sirius, the moon in Cancer. So this is a huge Sirian starseed activation because the moon is at home in Cancer. So this is like the ruling quote unquote planet of this starseed location of Sirius. And it's naturally in opposition almost directly to Vega. So that's an interesting dynamic in and of itself with the Sirians and the Lyrans. We can go into that another time. But this opposition will be happening right before the full moon. So this is where it really begins in terms of a consolidation of power, because this full moon is going to really show us where our true self-esteem and emotional stabilization, what has culminated from that new moon, and what needs to be released, like what is not actually allowing us to return to a sense of deep connection and emotional vulnerability and protection, right? Like the actual protection, the shell of the crab, so to speak. So we'll see like where that needs to be shored up, what is actually working in terms of that containment system, because what is on the other side of it is a pretty destructive and a pretty destructive, manipulative, and overall just really an eye-opening experience in terms of the social order. You're getting so close to like the suits behind the matrix, right? This is the last degrees of Capricorn are like the secret executive board that makes the decisions behind the scenes. So, I mean, by the time we get to this full moon on the 17th, we will have seen quite a bit, and we will see for sure, what's to come, and what has been repressed, what has been exploitive and manipulative when it comes to the power structures that currently exist. And it's going to be brought to light, and there's just going to be these moments, I feel like, leading up, and especially at the full moon. And then beyond the full moon is going to be really important in general, because I think that's when we're going to really need to have paid attention to the full moon and be like, okay, this is where I am compatible with the people that are right around me. This is where I am compatible with my the core of who I am, right? Like this is where my structural integrity really is. This is my return to nature, so to speak, and my own nature. And the moon is at home in Cancer, so it's very powerful. And so deep feels, very intense inner life and experience, but also very illuminating at the same time in terms of what it is that allows us to consolidate our own power. Because this type of stuff over here is going to be very destructive and devastating, especially when it comes to like everything that has been built in order to contain us, even though it seems like we are free. It's almost destined. It seems like it's destined. The United States from the very beginning was meant to come back around to this very same concept and transform as a result of addressing what that means, an aviary is a beautiful place where there are a lot of different species of birds, and it's an open habitat that is available for visitors and the natives, right? The birds and all the critters that live in that habitat, but it's still an enclosed space. It's still an institutional framework that's containing those life forms. And this is the point of transformation via destruction that the United States is really destined at a starseed level to really address and to transform from. So in evolutionary astrology, the natal Pluto is the default setting for the individual or the native, so to speak, the event in this case. It's the default setting at a soul level of transformation, meaning that the soul has already found transformation in the past through that same dynamic. And you could argue that the United States being its intention being maybe the new Atlantis, perhaps. Whether or not you agree with that, you could at least accept that the founders may have been considering that as a potential. And already the transformation has been experienced as, you know, the destruction of a cage, or the realization of how much it's still a cage, right? Because the United States is a Cancer sun. It's a Cancer sun. It's at Sirius, actually. So if you really want to get into the dynamics of the Syrians versus the Lyrans and what their dynamic is in opposition to each other. I mean, you can see a lot of where the United States came from in terms of the people who established it and the old order of things and where they wanted it to go, right? And what it really was meant to be, which is a safe place, you know, a safe place it was much more of a mother, right? That is the Cancer element. It is water. It is feminine. It is like a nest. It is like a nest. And we'll see what's going to happen with the Pluto return of the United States. But it's that position is, there's a galactic degrees, and it's very much related to the Pleiadian nature, and those would be Pleiadian starseed markings in the starseed readings I do. So if you want to get more detailed information about how this upcoming week leading up to the full moon in particular is going to affect you by your sign, you can just keep an eye out for those videos. They're going to be uploaded to YouTube and BitChute here momentarily, and this is a great addendum for that much more specific and sign-oriented astrology forecast. So just keep an eye out for that. If you're not subscribed to either channel, that's a great way to just have them show up in your feed by sign as I upload them. So if you are new here, thank you for checking this out. And if you are a subscriber, thank you so much. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. So I'm going to leave it at that. You know, have a great week. And let's see here. If you are interested in supporting this work at all, getting more information, everything you need is in the description box below. Social media is primarily Telegram. So great community that is building over there, of course. And then also, too, if you are interested in supporting this work financially, you can visit Subscribestar. That's also in the description box below. Visit my website to get all the information in one place. Thank you so much, guys. Thanks for sticking around and checking this out. And I will see you on the next video. Take care of yourselves. Have a blessed day and take care.